Hey, what's up, everybody? Garrett Grumley here with Duty to Train. I watched a Breaking Points interview with Jocko about the Israel-Hamas war and Jocko's take on it. And I took down some notes and just wanted to share quick snippets with you about what I thought was important. And I think this is the way I'm going to do it going forward because this will kind of keep my thoughts fresh, give me all the best points, and then I'm going to try to break down like hour-long interviews into like roughly 10 minutes. So let's just jump right into it. So I'm going to show you a quick snippet. This is from the beginning of the interview, and Jocko talking about how a lot of people seeing, Hamas, Palestinians as this one big united front, and how he thinks that it's not as united as people might think.
You see a lot of a unified front, or what appears to be sometimes a unified front in Gaza, meaning you see right from October 7th, people cheering in the streets, celebrating. That unified front, I believe in many cases, is not true. Mm-hmm. It is people that are intimidated. It is people that are trying to live their lives and trying to, when the mob moves into your neighborhood, when the cops come into town, you don't talk to the cops.
Of course.
When you have the opportunity to support the mob in some way that's going to make your life and your family's life better and easier, you show support.
He goes on to talk more about that and lots of other things, but I just want to quickly show kind of where he was starting to come from. And that's, 2 minutes and 45 seconds into a 47-minute interview. But I just took down some notes. I'm going to share those with you, and these are what I think are the most kind of key takeaways from the whole conversation. So first off, this whole interview started because Sagar and Jetty, the guy who's interviewing him from Breaking Points, which is kind of a center, independent-leaning media outlet, they did a segment on Jocko saying that Israel's losing the information war. Basically, there's a lot of international pressure about Israel and how they're dealing with this situation by basically just bombing a bunch of civilians. And they're trying to get Hamas, but it doesn't really seem like they're being very effective at getting after Hamas and really doing any real damage to Hamas. It just seems like they're killing a bunch of civilians in the meantime. And Jocko talks about that in this interview. He basically says that, right after Hamas attacked Israel seemed like, they were like, okay, we got totally caught off guard. And how do we regain our footing? We basically have to like shock and awe, attack back with force to show them like, okay, we're in charge right now. And now it seems like they might be like pulling back a little bit. And that's indicative of the ceasefire that's going on as we speak. So he goes into talking about the unified front, not as united as people think, which is similar to the Ramadi situation in Iraq. So Jocko Willink was a Navy SEAL, and he did 3 tours, one in 2003, 2004, and 2006, talks about that in the interview. And when they went to Ramadi in Iraq, it was like this Taliban stronghold. And instead of just bombing it like we did in the beginning of the war, they basically did a counterinsurgency where they basically just went, and started working with the populace. And, it was kind of like the hearts and minds type idea. And he says in the interview that he doesn't really like the idea of hearts and minds, but he said hearts, ideas, and money is good, because, you start giving leaders of the area who aren't really in support of Taliban, but, they support them because that's the only thing they have going for them and their families. If you start giving them a different way, then all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're not really with the Taliban, we're not with Al-Qaeda, but that's the only way we can support our family, and we don't want our families to be murdered. And so if the only way we can support our family and prevent our families from being murdered is to support the Taliban, then we'll do that. But once you give us a second option, then we're game. So he compared to Ramadi, Iraq, said the local support, like populace support Al Qaeda until it started to fall. Another thing Jocko talked about was he didn't find that, if you kill a terrorist, you create 5 more to be completely true. He said he didn't find it to be not true, but he said it's not like just a blanket statement. He said that a lot of people who were against the Taliban, who did not support them and only supported them, in Afghanistan and Iraq because it was the only option, they understood what the coalition forces were doing. And if unintended, civilian casualty ever happened, that there were many in the local populace who would understand that and see the situation that the coalition forces were in and be like understanding of that, even if it was like their son or daughter or something like that, because they didn't want to be under the Taliban. They understand it was like a part of war. And so he said that, it's not true, but it's, the idea that if you just kill one innocent person, you create 5 more terrorists. He's like, it's not always true. I think this is just my own personal take, but if you're just bombing a bunch of people like what Israel was doing in the beginning, yes, I think that is true, and I think Jocko would probably argue that's true as well. But if you're going in and it shows that like you're putting in the work day in and day out, over and over again, to go out of your way to prevent civilian casualties, and then one takes place, but the civilian population can see that your team has like taken casualties as well, because I mean you probably get to know these civilians like very, very well. And if you're working with them day in and day out, going knocking door to door, people probably get to know you, you get to know them. And if they realize that you're taking casualties in order to make sure that they stay safe, and you're trying to root out like terrorist cells, if eventually, one of their sisters or brothers gets murdered, I think that someone would understand, not that they would be happy about it, but they would view that differently than if you were just like bombing the town and they never really saw any Americans in the first place. Same thing with Israel. Talks about how Israel seems to be switching strategies, and initially it was like shock and awe, and now it's moving to like a siege warfare, which he says is good. It's going to prevent civilian casualties. It's going to get Palestinian civilians more on the side of Israel, which is good because you don't want Palestinians on the side of Hamas. He also talks about how, every single war is a battle of wills and means, and how Hamas seems to have the will, but it probably doesn't have the means. And Israel seems to know this. And so they might have been like shock and awe in the beginning, but it seems like they're starting to mellow out a little bit. And, Hamas can only sit in their bunkers for so long. If Israel is able to effectively cut them off from like food and supplies and stuff like that, eventually they're going to start to run out of fuel, food, energy, and it's going to be a lot easier to take them over than if you were to like try to go in right now. So it might be more of a long drawn out process, but by design, because Israel wants to draw this whole thing out. Another thing that Jocko talked about was as the IDF starts to interact with the Palestinian populace, as they start to kind of root out Hamas, and hopefully starts to give the Palestinians some means to really thrive and prosper, then the Palestinians are going to see the IDF and Israel in general as like the evil, terrible people that Hamas has told them that they've been. So everybody thinks, lots of people are evil around the world, but if you come like face to face with that person, like have a beer with them, you probably start to realize like, like some people really are evil, but then some of people are not. They just live under a really evil, repressive regime. And if Israel is able to give these people a way to make a living and support their family and provide, that's far better than what Hamas has given them over the past 15 years, then that might start to shift the narrative. Jocko also talked about how Israel needs to learn to make friends with their neighbors if they don't want to play defense for the next 1,000 years. And a lot of people might get upset at this, and he says this. He said, they've tried, lots of things, but they've also done other things. And he didn't go into detail, but he said that, Israel's done a lot to try to make friends, but they've also done a lot to jeopardize the ability to make friends. And I actually saw something, this is a little bit out of left field, but Dave Smith, he's a comic, but he has a very extensive like political podcast, and he's like very involved in this whole Palestinian. He's a libertarian, very anti-war, and he talked about the other day that Benjamin Netanyahu, like there's like quotes from Israeli newspapers, lots and lots of sources said this on the Joe Rogan podcast, that Netanyahu basically propped up Hamas because he didn't want an actual two-state solution. And so I haven't personally looked into that, but if you want to go look into that, feel free. He said he had the receipts. He said it on Joe Rogan. That's a pretty bold statement to make if you don't have the receipts. So, Israel's not perfect. They've done lots of things to jeopardize their ability to make friends. But if they want to not have to battle for the next 1,000 years, what Jocko was saying is they're going to have to figure out a way to make friends. And I don't think that's a crazy statement, and they've tried, but maybe they could try harder. So the last thing he talks about is people who are anti-compromise when it comes to this whole situation. Basically, go strap on your kit, get a gun, and go fight yourself, because it seems like all the people who don't want to compromise are all the newscasters, people talking from Washington, D.C. And, if you don't want to compromise when it comes to war, then go strap up and go fight yourself. So I think that's a good place to end it. This guy has tons and tons of experience when it comes to counterinsurgency. He has been in it. He knows how local populations feel when it comes to, people invading their land, but while those people are under terrorist rule. So what is happening in Israel is exactly what he went through in Afghanistan and Iraq in 2003, 2004, 2006. And it's not a point of view that we should just cast aside easily, because this is just like straight firsthand experience. So until next time, stay safe, live free, and I'll talk to you later. See ya.